Welcome to Journeys. This is a space for raw, honest conversations about the stories that shape us. And today I'm sitting with Gill and we're exploring her journey through motherhood from what began as a textbook experience into a much more complex and unexpected path. So first of all, welcome, Gill.
Thanks.
So can you take us right back to the beginning, Gill, and tell me, what did your first pregnancy and birth feel like for you?
So my first pregnancy, I got pregnant almost straight away. It was just after my husband's 30th birthday, and he was like, "Oh, and I was like, "I'll go on, sure." So that was the January we decided, and in the April I was pregnant. I had some implantation bleeding, which was, scary at the time, but when it was explained to me, it was totally fine. And then I did not have morning sickness. I lost all arthritis symptoms while I was pregnant, which was amazing. And I did as I was told and did combined care. So I did my GP and consultant-led care down in Wexford. And I asked them about doing domino, and I was told I wasn't allowed, which I thought was hilarious. But I said, do you know what, go on, whatever. I knew I was going to manage to do this as naturally as possible anyway, because my mother had 4 natural births. My late sister had 2 fairly straightforward births as well. My family all had big babies vaginally. My granny had a set of twins vaginally. Like, it was, this is birth, this is what we do. We get pregnant, we birth our babies, and we do what the midwife tells you, and you just get on and feed them then afterwards. That's just the way I was brought up, like. No issues, nice long early stages of labour, like 4 days of walking it off. And then when it came to crunch time, I was in active labour for 4 hours. I had some gas in air when I got into the hospital, and I pushed all 9 pound 3 ounces of my son out by myself. Not an issue. Got him out. He had a couple of issues latching, bilateral lip tie. Stuck an old nipple shield on, and sure, off we went, and we were grand. There wasn't a bother on us, and he was flying. He was a Velcro baby, so I learned how to baby wear, and that kind of made me become a baby wearing consultant and all the rest of my query things. But he was like textbook, not a bother on him. Had a couple of things as he got older, like he had an undescended testicle that he needed a hernia style surgery for. That was an in and out of Crumlin in 4 hours job. Nothing serious. Then we discovered that he was legally deaf, so we had to get grommets when he was 4. But other than that, like, he was fine. There was never any issues with him. He was great. Real easy kid, still is an easy kid, even at 11. He's prepubescent, but he's still like a really easygoing kid. He's deadly. And then when he was 4, we discovered I was pregnant with Penelope.
Hey, so tell me about that. What did that look like?
That was completely unplanned. So it was a bit of a shock to the system. When I also had implantation bleeding with her. There's more of that afterwards. It was a little bit worse than with him, and there was a reason for it, which comes at the end. Then I lost my dad to suicide when I was 5 months pregnant with Penelope, and I didn't grieve because I was pregnant at all, just kind of stored inside me. I went into labour with Penelope early hours of the morning, and I knew it was very early. My brother was actually living with us at the time because he was doing his apprenticeship. So I got up and I made lunches for everybody, and he's panicking. My brother's looking at me going, "Gilly, do I need to call an ambulance?" I'm like, "No, lad, you're grand. Like, just go to work, you're fine." And sent Ian into work. He was still working in his old job, and I sent him into work as well. I was like, "I'll call you when I'm ready. I'm going to walk it off, go for a nap, whatever." And I started getting real intense real quickly again. Now, Sebastian's had gone from nothing to quick, full whack real quick, and he still has it in his head that he just about got me to the hospital now. We had plenty of time. Like, we were there for 4 hours. And he didn't want me to have a home birth for that very reason then as well, because he was afraid that things would go wrong. And we all know if the partner's not on board, there's no point trying, because you need to have everybody on your team completely on board with these things. So, because I had been a doula at this stage, I had hired a doula, and I had texted my doula that morning really early because her other half was working in Dublin So I wanted to make sure he didn't get on the train so that she'd be free to come. So I texted her really early. I was like, hey, tell him not to get on the train. It's starting. It's going to happen today. And she was like, oh, he was working from home anyway. No worries. So it started ramping up. I rang in. I was like, come on home, will you? And he came home and it was still bouncing on the ball. He was like, what do you want to do? I was like, go round to Brooks and get me a hash brown roll and get yourself something to eat. And you can have a nap on the couch there, and then we'll decide when you wake up what's going to go down. So he got me my hash brown roll, which was absolutely gorgeous. I can still taste it. It was so good. And he had a breakfast roll, I think. And then he had a nap for about an hour and a half on the couch because he'd been up for work at 5:30 in the morning, like whatever. He was going to be driving. And we have our adrenaline and everything going through us. We're all good. And I was like, I think it might be time to go. So I texted Susan and I said, listen, meet us down at the hospital. He's kind of anxious that we go in. So I went in and wagon features wouldn't descend. She would not make contact with my cervix. She just wouldn't descend. I was contracting and the waters were in the way. And after about 6 hours in there, midwife had done an exam on me and she goes, I can feel the sac bulging. And I looked at Susan and I went, I've had enough. I'm going to get her to break. And she goes, if you think that's the right thing to do, go for it. I was like, grand, let's do it. So the midwife broke the waters and Penelope was mech too. She had passed all her meconium in utero and was floating in it. So, of course, the panic was on then. Get her out as quick as possible. So 3 hours later, she still hadn't come out because she still hadn't descended fully. It was like she was, oh no, I'm not quite ready, ma. And we had a shift change and the next midwife came on and she was panicked because she hadn't seen me all day. She, and all she saw was mech 2. Let's get this baby out. So she was trying really hard to coach me and I was tired at this point because we were already into like 10 hours at this stage. I was tired. Everyone else had food and slept and everything, and I had kept myself upward and mobile to try and get gravity on my side and get her going. And I'd had Susan do rebozo on me and everything. Like I'd tried absolutely everything. And in the end, Susan stood in front of the bathroom door and I went and hid in the bathroom and I sat in the toilet until I got her out. And she was born on the bathroom floor in the labour ward in Wexford. And when she came out, she was gurgling. So she had aspirated the meconium. One of the midwives in Wexford is a pal. She had done my friend's breastfeeding training with me. And she happened to have come on shift. She was supervising that evening and she came in and she's like, this mammy is breastfeeding. Everyone stand back for a minute till she tries to get her to latch before we take her. Because the paediatricians were lining up at that point. So we tried. And I think I got like 3 drops of colostrum out of me, which was really unusual as well that I'd noticed during my pregnancy. I hadn't leaked and I hadn't been able to express any colostrum, which was super weird for me because like I could have fed a county by myself on Seb. And I was, there's something weird about this. So that had kind of ticked in my head from I was pregnant. I was like, I wonder what's going on. Like, it's really weird. So placenta came out, wasn't complete. There was a 2 euro size missing. And they were like, okay, we'll keep an eye on that. You're still quite swollen. We'll see what happens. Okay, no problem. We're going to take her down to Skiboo and give her a once over. So I said to Ian, can you go down with her, please? Don't leave her on her own. And he was all shell shocked because doctors were there and, everything had happened really fast. Once she'd come out, everything had happened real fast. And they took her down to Skiboo and I sent Ian off. And I was severely dehydrated at that point. And they were a little bit worried about my bleeding, but not enough to warrant any further examination because I was fine other than I was seeing stars. And I was seeing stars, like everything was black and starry. So they hung a bag of fluids for me and made me lie down. Fluids went into me. I was still fucking spacey. Like it was weird. And I had sent Susan home at that point as well because she'd been there with me for over 10 hours. And I was like, girl, would you please go home and get some sleep? Like you must be wrecked. So Ian's from Wexford Town. He went to his dad's. Zeus went home, and I was still down the labour ward. And I was sitting there and I was like, I feel rotten. Nobody can hear me. So I went in and had a shower. And they came back in and they went, did you just have a shower? I was like, I was feeling rotten, and I was feeling gross, and I think the missing piece of the placenta came out. I left it in the shower for you. And they're like, yeah, that's definitely it, because it fit. They kept the placenta and it fit. I was like, great, at least we don't have to worry about that. Or so we thought. So I went down to see Penelope then. They brought me down in a wheelchair. I was feeling fine, because I'd no stitches. I had no drugs whatsoever. I had no epidural. I'd gotten her out by myself. So I was able to walk and everything, but they were like, listen, you were so spacey. We'll wheel you down. So they brought me down. I went in to see her, and they were like, we've had to give her antibiotics. So we need her to stay in the incubator for 24 hours, and we're going to monitor her. We'll come back in the morning. You'll need a sleep now yourself. So come back in the morning and we'll try feeding her. I was like, grand, no problem. So I went back in the next morning at 8 o'clock, and they'd already put an NG tube into her and given her formula. And I was disgusted. I was utterly fucking disgusted, because I had told them I was breastfeeding. I told them I was vegan. I told them I didn't want her to have formula. But they had dropped an NG tube. So NG tube is a nasal gastral tube. It's the tube they put in their nose and straight down into their stomach. And I was like, how much has she had? And they've had, she's had 3 40ml feeds. It's like, I was in an empty ward next door. You could have come and got me to feed her. I told you I was breastfeeding. So she was slightly dozy, slightly sleepy. I got her out. I gave her cuddles, tried to get her to latch. She did latch, and she sucked, and she did a great fucking latch. Oh my God, she had a great latch. I could feel my uterus contracting. She had such a good latch. And I went into her every 3 hours to try and feed her. And there wasn't enough coming out. So day 2, she was still in the skaboo. I spent a second night. Now I was meant to be doing domino with her. I was supposed to be home straight after having her, and everyone coming to visit me at home. It's day 2, we're in the hospital still. She's still in the skaboo. So I got my husband to pick up the breast pump off of the Friends of Breastfeeding buddy, who was the last one to have it. I got my mother to go and get me a steam sterilizer, because the hospital germs just freak me. And, I know breastfeeding stuff doesn't need to be as sterile, but I wanted a steam sterilizer. So my mother went and got me a lovely steam sterilizer. It was deadly. I kept it for years afterwards. And because they couldn't find a pump for me. Went down there.
Okay.
They had kits, but they couldn't find the pump. Somebody else had it, and they didn't know where it was. So got my own pump. The joys of being a Friends of Breastfeeding buddy, you get access to a hospital grade pump. So I got my own pump, and I started pumping, and I was only getting 5 mils. I was like, something up. So I know how to size my flanges. I knew everything was fitting fine. I was like, there's something up. Maybe it's because I'm missing her. Maybe it's because I haven't had all that skin to skin that I really need. So I was like, okay, we'll keep going. It's because she's not feeding on demand, and she hasn't been just cluster feeding and whatever. It's fine. The end of day 2, they took the tube over, and one of the graduation out of skaboo things is they have to drink out of a bottle, and they have to see metric values of what they're having. So she had to have 3 40ml bottles to get out of skaboo. Now at this stage, I was just like, you know what? It's fine. Just give it to her and let us get out of here. I'll reset life afterwards. And I'd already sourced vegan breast milk at that point as well, because, us vegans look after each other, and us breastfeeding mammies look after each other. So she'd had her 3 bottles, but she spiked a temperature then that night, and they were kind of afraid of her having an infection again, so they kept her in and monitored her again. And it was day 4 before I got her out of the skaboo. So she was 4 days in skaboo. So we had a night in the ward where they wanted to make sure that she was feeding fine, and they needed to do the 2 hearing checks. Because she went into special care, she had to have the 2 hearing checks. So she got the preemie one. Even though she was 38 and 5, she still had to get the preemie hearing check done. So she had that one done in skaboo, and then she had to get the other one done on the ward then as well. So that night we had the best healthcare assistant I have ever met in my whole entire life. And she actually set my bed up for co-sleeping. She's like, that baby needs to co-sleep with you. She's going to get that feeding going. Hang on, I go get the blankets. And she went and set up the rails and then the blankets under the sheets. And she got me extra blankets for Penelope to make sure that like the two of us had our own separate blankets. And she cluster fed. And by God, did she cluster feed all night long. And she was trying so hard. But she was still howling. She was starving. But she was cluster feeding, but she was starving. And I knew she wasn't getting enough. And I was like, there has to be something wrong with me. I was like, it's probably the stress of being in here. I'm probably still dehydrated. I haven't eaten properly because hospitals don't know how to feed vegans. So I was getting like cornflakes in the morning, which is great for bowel movements. And then I might get the vegetable soup if they could promise me it wasn't made on chicken stock. And then I was getting like a Subway or something off somebody coming in, because there was one evening, she said, what do you want for dinner? I was like, can I just get potato and vegetables? I was like, you can't just have potato. I was like, I'm vegan. Please just bring me potato and vegetables. And she brought it down with meat gravy on it because she couldn't bear the thought of me having dry vegetables. And I was in feeding pen and I came back out and I looked and I went, and she goes, you're not eating your dinner? I was like, that's meat gravy. And she goes, but you couldn't have a dry dinner. I was like, I don't eat meat. Like, what part of this are you getting? And my veganism is mainly down to food allergies. Like, but dairy doesn't really agree with me, and eggs don't agree with me. And yet, the odd time you'll see me eat cake, and I'll deal with it. And God love whoever's near me when I'm dealing with it. But like, that's why I don't eat animal stuff. I was like, anyways, that evening I cried. I rang my sister, and I was like, "Can you please go get me a vegan Subway of something?" And I'm so. So, anyway, so night 4, then in the hospital, co-slept. She cluster fed. I did not sleep. She cluster fed for 8 hours. I still had to give her 2 bottle top-ups. She wasn't getting enough food. Next morning, they discharged us with a box of formula saying, just keep her topped up, make sure she check her wet and dry nappies, or wet and dirty nappies. I did all that. Public health nurse came out. Fair play to you. You're doing great. Over the weekend, she weighed her. She goes, she's after dropping a little bit, but that's normal coming out of the hospital, especially if she's been tube fed. We'll keep an eye on her. And so she weighed her on the Friday, she weighed her on the Monday, she weighed her on the Wednesday, and she dropped more weight again. And at this stage, I had already rang Kitty to come and see us, because I was like, there's something up. I'm not, like, is she not latching properly? She's coming off screaming. As a peer supporter and a counsellor, I've done everything that's within my remit. I've ticked every box that I'm supposed to tick. Susan had come and seen us, and she's like, it looks great to me. Like, she looks like she's feeding great. I can hear her swallowing. Like, I don't get it. We went down to see my mum. My late sister was playing with her because she was her goddaughter, and she was like bouncing around the place, going, the howling out of this child. She's starving, Gill. Like, I was like, I have no idea, Kate. Like, I really don't. And like, hand express and pumping, I was lucky to get 10 mils out. And this is week 2. My milk should have come in at this point. That Friday, she had dropped 12.5% of her birth weight. Straight down to A&E. The worst experience of my life going through that A&E that evening. I checked her in and I checked myself in. I said, I'm her food source, and if she's losing this much weight, there's something wrong with me. So paediatrician came straight to see her. No issues. Paediatrician was free, was able to see her. There was no gynecologist available to see me at the time. So I was sitting in Peds A&E with her. I got a phone call then, getting screamed at. I could hear this woman through the closed door from the A&E desk screaming at me over why I wasn't sitting in chairs waiting on her. And she's just so horrible. And I said, I'm my daughter's food source and I'm not making milk, so there's something wrong with me. And I think I've got more retained product than we thought. Retained product has nothing to do with milk production. Who told you that? And I'm looking at her going, the 5 times the amount of lactation education I've had over you, lady. I said, I need a scan to make sure that I have no retained product. Well, all the sonographers are gone home. You're going to have to wait till Monday. Okay. What do I do in the meantime? I'll give you some Diphene. I was like, I'm allergic to Diphene. I can't take Diphene. What do you mean you're allergic to Diphene? It's like, well, it cuts a hole in my stomach and I bleed out of every orifice as a result. So she wrote me a prescription for something else. And it was just a different version of Difane. It was a very strong non-steroidal anti-inflammatory. And Penelope got admitted to the paediatric ward for the weekend, where they were to force feed her food to get her weight up. So thankfully the nurses did it for me, because I was crying, gag feeding my daughter. I couldn't do it to her. I physically couldn't do it to her. I felt like I was torturing her. But the nurses took her and did it, and they sat with her and made her overfeed herself to get her weight back up. So she regained her birth weight in 3 days from the amount that they fed her, which is what they wanted, because she was hitting that failure to thrive border. She'd lost that much weight. So then on the Saturday afternoon, I started vomiting blood from the prescription that that doctor had written me. And the nurse came in to check on Penelope, and I'd left her in her little fishbowl. And she came in to check on Penelope, and I was in the ensuite puking. And there was just blood, and I said, I'm about to start shitting blood. I can feel it. I can feel the diarrhea starting, and I know it's blood going to come out of me. She goes, what have you taken? I was like, just the prescription that that doctor gave me, who was so horrible to me. And I don't. So she hit a button. Somebody brought in a wheelchair and brought me back down to A&E. I don't even remember how that happened. But Ian came through the door just as it was happening. So he sat with Penelope and he fed her. And I went back down, and it was a different doctor who was on for the weekend. So most people don't know about registrars and what way their shifts work, but they do 36-hour shifts. So when they're on for a day and a bit. So this was a new reg who had started the night before, who had just come on. And I said to her, I'm allergic to non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. What have I been given? And she goes, it's just a different version of Difane is what you were given. I was like, okay, well, can we give me something else? Because I said, I'm not producing milk. I think I have retained product. She didn't hear me. She'd been up all night. Anyways, she said, the appointment's been made for the early pregnancy unit, because there's no appointments in outpatients available. So she's made the appointment for the early pregnancy unit for you for Monday morning at 9 o'clock. I was like, grand. So we got discharged Sunday afternoon, again with a box of formula. Went home, came back down on Monday morning, went into the EPAU. I kept Penelope out of the hospital. I was like, she can't come back in. She's 2 weeks old. She's already been in the hospital twice. This is bollocks. Like, her immune system is not going to be over because I haven't been feeding her. She's going to have a fuck all immune system, and the last thing I need is her picking up whatever hospitals have. So I was sitting in the EPAU, and I was sitting there for 40 minutes, which is not like the EPAU, because I've been in there twice before, for like at the start of both my pregnancies, and they normally see you straight away. They don't leave you sitting around, because it's such a sensitive time for people, and there's so many losses happening, and there's so many like abnormalities and all the horrible things that can happen in that unit. You don't sit there. They make you an appointment and you go in and out. It's nearly like private care. They're brilliant, to be fair to them. So I walked up to the desk and I said, I've been sitting here for 40 minutes and people have come and gone before me, and my newborn's sitting outside and I'm supposed to be breastfeeding her. Like, I don't know. She goes, we thought the appointment was a mistake because your daughter's 2 weeks old. We thought there was something wrong. I was like, no, there's no one to scan me over in outpatients, and I think I've got retained product. I need somebody to see me. She's like, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Give me a minute. So she got the supervising sonographer, and the supervising sonographer saw me and goes, I'm going to just page OB. Can you give me a minute? I was like, yeah, sure, of course. Thanks so much for fitting me. And she goes, no, like, I'm sorry we left you. Like, I bumped everyone else up because we thought you were wrong. So I've loads of time. Take your time. You're fine. And apparently I had already gone grey at this point. So the blood loss was already happening. And she paged OB, and the reg who'd seen me on the Saturday night was on. And she put the sonographer wand, the scanny wand thing, onto my stomach, and I could feel the gush from her just putting pressure on my stomach. And she goes, oh shit. I said, what's wrong? She goes, there's significant retained product. I was like, how significant? Between 12 and 15 centimetres. So I had what they call an auxiliary lobe, where a second placenta had started to form at some point. I did not process this until much later on when I went back for my debrief after everything that had happened. So I was like, axillary lobe? And she's like, it's like a second placenta, but it never fully formed. You have an open wound in your uterus and you're bleeding. We need to get it out of you. Okay. So I was brought into the waiting room where they normally tell people that their baby hasn't lived. And this is where they put me. And the reg came down and the OB who was on duty came down. And the reg came down and she goes, you said that to me and I didn't clock it and I'm so sorry. I was like, you're grand. Like, you know, you're not a sonographer. How the fuck were you meant to know? You know, I couldn't blame her really. Like, she's not a sonographer. She didn't know what to do. So the OB goes, right, we can give you pills. Like, you're not giving me pills. I am not risking taking pills. You're going to put me under. You're going to go in there. You're going to take everything out. Mm-hmm. I am 2 weeks bleeding. Like, you know, my iron levels are through the floor. I'm supposed to be feeding her everything. Grand. We're going to get you admitted. I said, grand, I'm going down to Penny's. I need to buy pajamas. I need to buy a toothbrush. I literally have a changing bag for her and nothing else. I need to go and get that. And they said, grand, you're breastfeeding. I said, I am. Great. You're going into room M1, which is the first private room in Wexford. And we'll have you a pump set up with all the pumping kits and we'll have a fishbowl for Penelope to sleep in. You Chewies are coming back in. Be back up here for 1 o'clock. So I went to Joanne's and I got avocado on sourdough mushrooms. I went to Penny's and got the most gorgeous pajamas that I only threw out like last year. And I got a towel, like a black towel, because I knew what was coming. And I went to Boots and I got 2 packs of adult nappies, just to be certain. I went in. Now, in the meantime, I'd also started the Newman Goldfarb protocol, which is the lactation protocol that adoptive parents and non-gestational parents use to breastfeed. So I had gotten my pumping up to about 25 mils of 2 breasts. I don't have small boobs. I don't make very little milk. 2-week-old should be making way more than that. I was like, right, okay. So I pumped out my 25 mils and I gave it to my mother when I was going down for my D&C. I was like, here, give her that. And I was like, make sure you give her 40 mils of formula minimum. She'll probably drink the whole thing for you though. Grand. I was gone for 3 hours. So down for pre-op. The usuals, gingers take longer to knock out. There was a new fella, he didn't realise, and everyone was laughing at him. Went in, had my D&C, came out. 2 hours after my D&C, I was in recovery for 40 minutes and then they brought me straight back down and like I nearly smothered Penelope when I seen her. And 2 hours after that surgery, where they removed all of the retained product, which was indeed significant, is all they said. I pumped 65 millilitres. My body still thought I was pregnant and wasn't producing milk as a result. And it took me a while to get her used to being on the breast for all her feeds. It took me like about 3 weeks, I think. She was still getting top-ups, but like I'd stick a hacket on one side and give her the bottle because there was that much falling out of me as a result of, you know, getting that lump of placenta removed from me. So when she was 5 months old, she was starting to sleep for stretches. For all she was co-sleeping and, you know, being fed on demand, she was starting to sleep for stretches. And because I wasn't feeding her as often, I could feel postnatal depression slipping in. Now, I had had weaning blues with Sebastian, so I knew what like the low felt like. And I have lived with, you know, anxiety and feelings of, you know, the world ending for most of my life. Joys of growing up undiagnosed neurospicy. And I just knew the grief was starting to catch up in me. And I knew that everything that had happened with her was starting to catch up in me. And I was due to go back to work when she was 7 months old. And I went down to the doctor and I went, I think I have postnatal depression. And he goes, okay. And I literally started listing off all my symptoms. And he stopped me after about 5 and he goes, so we're going to start you on 50 milligrams of sertraline. And I was like, but what about the rest? And he goes, no, that's enough. You're not well. You're sick. It's okay. You're sick. So I went on sick and then we went into lockdown. So I went through postnatal depression through lockdown. And Ian was working in a supermarket. So he was doing home deliveries as well as working his normal shifts. So he was working overtime because he was the only grown up with a full driver's license who could drive the van. And I spent lockdown fighting postnatal depression on my own, because I couldn't see anyone. I couldn't go to anyone. I had no breastfeeding group. I had no sling library. There was nothing. And virtual doesn't cut it when you can't even pick up the phone. Mm-hmm. And so when she was 14 months, I went back to work. Part-time-ish. And I was still on the antidepressants. And I was still breastfeeding her. So she'd go to creche. I'd feed her, dropping her off in the car, because we couldn't go into creche because of lockdown protocols. And I'd drop her off. I'd feed her before I'd bring her in. She'd have oat milk in creche. I wasn't fussed about expressing milk to give her, because she was eating loads and everything at that point. And then I'd feed her when I pick her up, or when I get home in the evenings, and then I'd feed her during the night if she needed it. And then when she was 18 months, I weaned her. And when she was 20 months, I went, I think I can actually come off these antidepressants. There was a year on them at that stage, and the nothingness cloud had lifted at that point, and I was starting to feel things again. I was like, you know what, maybe we'll try and come off them. So I made an appointment with the GP, and I was like, I think I'm ready to come off these. And he was like, are you sure? I was like, yeah. And he goes, right. So what we're going to do is, you're going to literally, how much you have at home, you're going to snap them in half for the next week. And then in a week's time, you're going to snap them in 4. And then when those 7 snapped in 4, so that was like another 4 weeks of it. And so it was a very, very gradual process of coming off the antidepressants. It took me nearly 2 months to come off them. Longer, nearly 3 months. It was 2 months. And then it was like one every other day. And then I just forgot to take them. But that was rough, going through that. Like, lockdown was rough for everybody. I am not saying, woe was me. Lockdown was just rough, full stop. But lockdown with no in-person support, with, your husband who's out working every hour God sends to keep everybody safe, and then you're dealing with 2 small children at home, one of whom still to this day will have attachment issues over the fact that she was taken off me and spent the first 4 days of her life in an incubator. Like, it does have an effect on them. She's have very anxious attachment style. Like, if she's getting better, she's a lot better. Like, she'll walk to the bus stop by herself in the morning now, which is amazing for a 6.5-year-old. But her big brother's on the bus with her. She's not on her own, but she does. There's times where she's like stuck to me, and she doesn't just hold your hand; she hangs off you. It's like she needs to be back inside you nearly. So it has had a profound effect on her. And I'd class myself as a lazy parent. Some people like the whole attachment parenting shite. I call it lazy parenting because I just can't be making the effort to put them down. That takes effort. It's like, oh no, just attach them to you and you don't have to worry about them, so it's fine. So she would have been carried and fed on demand, and she was the one who wanted to be put down more often. She gets touched out, but she still wants you. So I think the fact that I would have parented her that way, that it has made it that bit easier. I reckon she'd be an absolute nervous wreck had I tried, crying it out and putting her down and pushing her in the pram. And, she went in the pram because she wanted it. Like, I'd put her in the sling and she'd be pushing off me, so I'd put her in the pram. And she quite enjoyed it. Whereas Sebastian hated it. I sold the pram for him because he hated it that much, and he only went on my back from he was like 8 months old. So it's amazing how different 2 kids can be as well. But she's only for the fact, I think, that I did do that, fully responsive to her as soon as I got her back. I reckon she'd be a holy mess, because she is very much a hide behind my legs sort of girl until she feels she's okay. Except for your girls, of course, because, they're so cool.
You mentioned as well that when you were 5 months pregnant, you lost your dad to suicide.
Yes.
And you didn't grieve.
No.
So when the postnatal depression hit...
Oh, that was all of it together in one go.
Okay.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And still, my dad's dead 7 years this year, and I still grieve him every so often. Like, there'll be something random, like a robin will show up, or Some people play Simon and Garfunkel, or, you know, something random, or I'll do a DIY job and I go, Jesus, Lavery, you're deadly. That was my dad's line when he did something good. So, yeah, like I'm still, because I missed out on nearly 2 years of grieving for him. So that kind of makes it hard. And then 3 years ago, I lost my sister to suicide as well. So it's like that bit never leaves. You have that continuous level of grief that never actually leaves you. It just kind of takes over and over and over, and you have to kind of try and stay strong for everyone else. Like, you know, Penelope was only 3.5 when Kate died, but she was her godmother, and they did have a little bit of a thing because they're both very girly. I am not girly in any way, shape, or form, but like Kate was a makeup artist and she was very girly and glamorous and everything, and Penelope is very girly. So like, and they had that whole, you know, she's my godmother, she's my goddaughter thing. The two of them did. It was, and she still misses her. So I still have to go through all of that with her. And then my sister's boys, you're trying to keep her memory alive for them, but you don't want to make it sad for them, because it's hard for them because they were so little losing their mammy. Her eldest fella is with my mum, and he's 17 now and he's learning to drive. And then her smaller boys are all neurodivergent. Well, 2 of them are neurodivergent, and so you want them to be happy about their mammy, but you don't want them to be, you know, in the depths of depression all the time. And they have to move on with their lives and learn to grow up as well. And the eldest fella's the only one who knows that it was suicide. Everyone else, it's like she was found in the river. It's too little to understand it. They're still too little to understand it. We don't understand it. So how are we going to explain it to small children, you know? So that grief thing always, it's kind of stacked. We never got a break from it. It just kind of stacked. And I was surprised at myself that I didn't start smoking again. And I didn't go back on antidepressants after Kate died. I think I had one cigarette and I went, oh, actually, no, that just feels wrong. And yeah, definitely the grief and postnatal depression together in the middle of lockdown wasn't cool at all.
And really then wasn't. The fact that you're still processing all of that grief and you're still grieving, but you have to be strong for everybody else. That can't be easy.
Absolutely. And especially when you feel like I'm the eldest. My dad was gone. And the joke, like my brother's nearly 15 years younger than me. So the joke has always been like that I was the firstborn son, because I was the one who always went and did jobs with daddy, and you know, I was his little apprentice, and I would be kind of practically minded, shall we say. But yeah, it was, don't get me wrong, like my sisters, like obviously it affected Kate more than it affected all of us, because she's not even here anymore, so it obviously affected her really badly. And then Harriet and Zachary, my mum found my dad, but Zachary had to help her. He was only 19. So like it affected all of us really badly. But then, you know, being the eldest, it's up to me to kind of listen, be there and be practical. And I am very practical. And, you know, part of the spiciness is when you hit crunch time, you just sort things out. So I would fix things and just do things, and things would get sorted, you know, and then I would sit and stare at a wall for 3 days. And everyone else would be fed. And everything would be kind of normal around everyone else. But I wouldn't have walked. Mightn't have had a shower. Still be in the same pyjamas I was in 3 days ago. And at one stage Ian didn't even notice, because he was just so focused on getting in and out, because he knew I was at home. He was like, she'll be fine, she'll be grand. And he was just focused on working. And he didn't even realise. One stage I was literally sat in the same armchair for 3 straight days. Kids had been fed. Dishwasher was done. There was dinner on the table, but like I hadn't looked after myself in any way, shape or form. I hadn't moved my body. I think I'd brushed my teeth because I could actually smell myself. But I hadn't showered. I hadn't dressed myself. I hadn't even set foot outside. And that was when I realised, shit, I really need to go do something about this. And I said to him, I haven't moved in 3 days, and I think I'm really sick. I need to go and see the doctor. And he was like, well, what do you mean you're sick? I was like, this is depression. This is proper depression. Like it would be easier if I didn't wake up tomorrow morning. I never had suicidal ideation myself. I never thought about killing myself, but it like for months and months, it'd be like, if I didn't wake up, it'd be just so much easier. And I still go through spells of that, you know, perimenopause is fab. But, you know, I know it's just my hormones now, and I know it's not that I've slipped back into it, it's just that I'm being hormonal or I'm just a bit sad. But it does, particularly when there is that history of mental illness within your family, which clearly there is. Like I've lost 2 other cousins to suicide as well, like one 17 years ago and one a couple of months ago. And it is really, really rough. And when you've lost someone to suicide, anyone else then who finds it, it kind of it instantly find you then, and we all seem to find each other, and there's always someone you've lost, and there's always someone who else it's affected. And there's no way of making sense of it, because the only one with the answers is the one who can't tell you. And that's the hardest part of it, because you're kind of looking going, what the fuck were you thinking? And there's never an answer. And that's the bit that you have to live with then. And then, so the question then that always comes back to me it's only started kind of in the last, since Kate died actually, is was Penelope a twin? And I don't really talk about it or like go into it, but every so often I often think, oh Christ, maybe she was. It was obviously far too early. I think it was 6 weeks when we had that implantation bleed. And I remember telling the girl I was working for at the time, I told her before I told anyone else I was pregnant, it's like, I peed on a stick this morning. And I'm telling you because I had implantation bleeding with my eldest and it frightened me. And I'm afraid if it's going to happen again. And she goes, okay, thanks for telling me. Nobody needs to know anything. But when it happens, or if it happens, you tell me and we'll fix it. So for the next 3 weeks, she actually made sure she was on the same shift as me. And it happened when I was in work. And I was like, I remember texting her, I was like, Nicola, I need to go to the doctor. So I literally ran across to the GP and they were like, right, go straight down to Wexford. And it was the same thing. It's like, we won't know for another few weeks, you know, it's very early. But now, because of having processed grief, having processed the postnatal depression around everything that happened, and then it's like every so often it pops into my head of, maybe she was. And then I'm like, well, obviously they weren't meant to be, because if they were, they'd have stuck around. They didn't. They weren't meant to be. But it's still, you know, when you're sad, they'll come in.
Of course. Of course. And has Penelope ever said anything that...
No. For someone who's intuitive as her, who, like, she talks about my dad. She never met him, but she talks about him. But she has never said anything about a twin or another baby or anything like that, other than she'd love to be a big sister, which she's not going to be because I got neutered. So she's not going to be a big sister. But she often says she'd love to be a big sister. No, sorry, sweetness. There's no more babies coming from mommy and daddy. And she's like, oh, but why? It's like, well, do you remember I went to the hospital and the doctor made sure that I couldn't have any more babies? And she's like, oh, okay.
I get the same.
Yeah.
I get the same. Sorry, Jill. Obviously, I'm going to edit this part because I lost. If someone came to you and they're in the thick of a similar experience to you right now, what would you say to them?
Sit down and breathe. Don't put any pressure on yourself. And get some help for your partner. Because nobody expects their other half to sit and stare at the wall and not be able to function. And particularly when if you are the one who is the organizer and the doer and the brains, not the brains of the operation, but the thinker and the one who bears the mental load, your other half isn't going to know what to do. And they're going to feel like the world is ending for them. And if both of you aren't functioning, like, it's no good for anybody. So make sure your other half gets some help as well. Like, there's so many resources available. Like, there's BetterHelp, which most of the health insurance companies nearly cover 100% of the cost of that, and that's just virtual counselling. locally here, we've got Talk to Tom. You know, like the mental health midwife for yourself as well. Like I had virtual sessions with the mental health midwife in Wexford. She was fabulous. I remember meeting her after lockdown and like I hugged her so hard. But and finding someone you're happy talking to yourself, like it's really hard to find a counsellor you're happy with. I've been through, oh my God, like Roisin was brilliant down in Wexford. I think I've been through about 11 counsellors in total. I've ratted the ears off you. I've ratted the ears off poor Sandy. Like everyone has gotten a bit of it off me, and sometimes I feel like a bit of a burden. And then in other ways, I'm like, well, you know, when they're not able for me, they'll pull away and they tell me, because thankfully we have that professional level between us that, like, you know, we're able to do that. But sometimes it just gets to me where I end up just chatting shite out of, I just need someone to talk to, from holding it together for everybody else for as long as you do. And it is hard.
And what does it mean to you right now, sharing your story?
I don't cry as a rule. I don't cry with you. I think that's because you're a crier too, though. I feel like I can. I just don't want anyone else to ever feel like they're on their own, because they're not. There's so many of us out there. And I think even seeing, like, you know, my textbook first pregnancy, everything went right, nothing went wrong. Yeah, he was a little bit sick from, you know, asthma and eczema and whatever. He had little things. He wasn't deathly ill at any stage, and nothing went horribly wrong with him. I had, like I said, I had a little bit of weaning blues or whatever with him, and I still found the calling to do the work that I do. And then I went and prepared myself beyond belief for my second pregnancy. Still went tits up. And I think it was another thing that I always want people to realise is, it doesn't matter how well prepared you are, it doesn't matter how much support you have in place. If things are going to go wrong, they're going to go wrong. And no amount of having a doula, doing your antenatal classes, fucking hypnobirth and brain training, active birth, whatever the fuck, none of that is actually going to make a difference if things are going to go wrong. My daughter decided to shit all over her birth plan. Literally. There's nothing anyone could have done about that. She took the biggest shit she possibly could and then decided to stick it in her lungs. There's nothing anyone could have done about that. I was completely brain trained out of it. Fully visualization, you know, mile circuit, turning myself upside down, you name it, I did it. She wasn't coming out without having a great big shit. She still takes her time having a shit as well. But yeah, but having the support in place will make it that bit easier in those first few weeks to get through it and to just like pick yourself up and move on. Like Ian tells everybody, Jesus, we had a doula, and I know Jilly's a doula, but we had a doula for the second one. It's the best thing you ever do for yourself. Just to feel like there's someone else in the room and it's not all on you. And then, you know, as doulas, we then mortar down with each other, and we have our person that we chat it all out to then as well. So it does make it that bit easier then for us then as well to be able to be present for everybody. But yeah, just feel you're not on your own. Reach out and get the support. And the other thing that I suppose as well is, if you feel like you can't afford support, still text us and ask us and tell us what you have, and we'll work something out with you. We'd never see anyone stuck, ever, because we'd hate having been through it. I think that's why we do what we do. There's always something that has triggered us into it, because like you knew me before Penelope, where I said she's birth's not for me, and after I had her I was like, nah, nobody should go through that in their own. There is always some part of us that puts us to where we are, so we would never ever let anyone go through it on their own, and we would always find some way of supporting you, because we wouldn't wish that on. And we don't trauma dump our own shit on you while we're doing it, though.
Yeah, it's funny, like you are telling your story now, and I'm thinking, like, of all the clients you've had, I can guarantee that not many of them know your story
There's a
at all.
handful. There's a handful who do, because I had to reassure them that, you know, that their doctor made the right call on their section. Because their baby didn't end up in the SCBU, and their baby is still able to feed, and yes, it's not the vaginal birth that they dreamed of, but them and their baby actually are not traumatized, and that we can process it not going to plan, as opposed to everything going wrong. There was one particular part of it didn't go right, but you're fully supported. And so those handful who've had, you know, intrapartum sections, or have had last minute, we're changing the game plan sections, they're the ones that know my story. But other than that, and today, but other than that, like, it's not something I go shouting about, like, oh yeah, my daughter was in the SCBU as well. Oh my God, yeah, sure, she's grand now. Sure, look at her, she's 6. Not bothering her. And I don't ever get into it, because that's my problem. It's not yours. I do talk about my feeding journeys, because particularly postpartum, that's a lot of what we kind of get into. So I do talk about my feeding journeys of, you know, I've gone through bilateral lip ties where we've had to use nipple shields because the poor little fecker couldn't latch. But he fed like a champ when we gave him a bit of a hand.
And sometimes it is important to share a little snippet, because it helps someone to feel normal in their journey.
Oh, 100%. And you don't want to be sharing your other clients' journeys, because that's theirs. It's not mine to share. That's their journey. I have a handful of ones where, you know, they were like, oh, put that on Instagram, or they tag me in it very publicly. And they're like, yeah, absolutely, tell my story. And I'll use theirs because they've given me explicit permission to do that. But like, there's like, when we start totting up how many people we've looked after over the years, like, I had one potential client ask me how many birth clients I'd attended. So I actually went back checking. Like, I've done 178 births in the last 4 years. Significant level of births. I don't tell everybody. Like, people don't know how many times I've been in Hollis Street. Half the midwives in Hollis Street don't even realise either, because, you know, there's so many of them, and there's so many different shift patterns and stuff. Tend to meet the same ones over and over, thankfully. Some good ones. Because of where I live, I suppose I mainly cover Wicklow and South Dublin. So I spend most of my time travelling northwards. And I think I've only been to 2 or 3 births in Wexford total. So, other than my own 2. So it's not somewhere that I work very regularly. So when I go in there, I get the, how are you? You know?
There's like a, hello again, Lorraine.
Yes, because you could spit at the hospital from your gaff. Whereas I'm not. I'm actually nearly closer to Hollis Street, you know? And the same in the Coombe. Like, any of my clients who I bring to the Coombe anyway, they're on their hands and knees. They're mooing their babies as we're going through the door, because it's that sort of a place anyway. But postpartum, I've been a postpartum doula for 10 years this year. I've helped close on 500 families. Lots of multiples. So we can't even get into the number of babies I've held. And as a baby wearing consultant and breastfeeding counsellor and everything else, you know, none of us do just one thing, because it is such a broad spectrum of how we do what we do. But like,
and we see the gaps.
We see
where people fall through the gaps, and we want to make sure that they don't.
Exactly. And like, random things like, you know, building nurseries for people.
Putting up stair gates.
Putting up stair gates and shelves and stuff, and, you know, installing car seats, and actually bringing people into nursery stores and going to them, right, I know you, and you're not going to listen to that saleswoman who's going to try and sell you the €1,800 pram, when we're going to push them and play with them. We're going to find one second hand, and we'll buy a new mattress for her. And being able to do that for people, because I did that too. And, you know, we find the gaps, and we know our friends who can fill those gaps. Like, you know, I've recently started doing Reiki as well, but I'm still not quite confident doing babies. First thing I do is ring you for a Reiki for babies. And in the same way as you see someone with a sling and you're like, I don't know that one, here's Julie's number. You know, and like, you know, I've started doing the pregnancy yoga, because when I did active birth as something different, because no one down our way was doing active birth. You know, you've developed your antenatal course, and Gemma does her one, and Jermaine does her one, and like, but nobody was doing active birth, like a physical, let's get into it. And when I was doing that, I was like, oh, I really need to do pregnancy yoga. When I was doing it, So now I've gone and done my 200 hours, and I've done the pregnancy and postpartum, and I'm working that into what I do as well. And even now, like my pregnancy classes, I'm doing bits of active birth have been woven into it with, you know, some pelvic floor training, because it doesn't matter what way your baby comes out of you, the pressure on your body, you know. And so we never just do a straight anything.
Mm-hmm.
We never just do birth support. We never just do VBAC
There's
support.
always something.
There's always something else in it that we've woven into it to make it fit you, because we've seen the gaps, because we've been doing it for so long. And it's such a difference to the families that we work with, and the ones who do find us, and the ones that we click with and gel with. And I suppose I don't know about you, but recently, over the past few years, I've been finding myself more into full spectrum, where we're doing, you know, we get the phone call from the P on the stick. We're talking them through the pregnancy. And, you know, I'd a client recently enough who did that because I had gone into her when she had gotten postnatal depression, and she was like, never again. Never again. And she beat on the stick, and she was texting me and she was, we're doing this, and like, it's already started. You know, and then I have my clients, and I'm sure you have as well, where we've helped them through miscarriages and losses and abortions that were never meant to be but had to, and all those bits where we then take what we've learned and put that into practice and be able to stand firm and strong in what we've learned to be able to help those people then through all those horrendous times, because you wouldn't wish it on anyone.
Before we finish up, do you want to tell people where they can find you?
Oh yeah, thanks. So Instagram, it's __ mummy hub __ because, you know, it's a deadly name and everyone uses it. mummyhub.ie, and yeah, that's me.
Yeah, and thank you so much
Thanks
for
having
being
me.
so vulnerable and so raw, and yeah, and for crying.
I know, it doesn't happen very often. You only get it.